Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. For over a century, the automotive DNA was rooted in steel, pistons, and horsepower. The value of a car was fixed as it left the factory, but that's no longer true. Today's cars, they are connected digital platforms that evolve with software. And it's not just about software-defined vehicles, it's about users like you and me owning the most powerful and precious computer in our lifetime. And we are in the middle of the biggest transformation ever in the automotive space. And that brings us to today's conversation, maximizing potential at the convergence of automotive, tech, and cloud. And this convergence isn't just about adding bigger, flashier screens or applications. It's about how the vehicles are built, how they're sold, how the vehicle ownership is evolving, and how companies are making money. So, for the next 45 minutes, we are going to unpack this topic. So, all the vehicles by 2040 will be SDV. And SDV is the approach. The software defined vehicle is the approach that cuts about 26% of the software spend for the OEMs. That is a huge improvement for time to market and technology, right? And this is all assisted by technology. So, for the next 45 minutes, we'll talk about the key technologies that are enabling this. We will understand the evolving ecosystem and supply chain that really truly helps make it possible because you and I all know that no one can do this alone. And we will get a real world look at new business models and the art of the possible that this convergence unlocks. So, we have a perfect pair of experts here on the call. Myself, Sushma Shah, I'm your moderator for today's session, and I have the privilege to introduce you, Frank Weeds. Frank recently retired after 18 years of executive roles at Volkswagen America. And during his tenure at Volkswagen, he served in multiple executive leadership roles in product strategy, planning, IT, and engineering. Frank played a key role in developing and implementing Volkswagen's connected and mobility services strategy for in car technology and digital services. He led initiatives to enhance customer experience through data analysis and partnerships, leveraging connectivity as a core differentiator for vehicles. And he is an MSU grad, so go green. He serves on the MSU advisory board for the mobility and new technology. Please welcome Frank and congratulations on your recent retirement.
Thank
And
you.
joining him, we have Sangeeta Theru, Director of Virtual Validation Platforms at Stellantis. Sangeeta's team builds and tests automotive software virtually using cloud-based digital twins to validate everything from propulsion to ADAS to infotainment before a single prototype is ever built. And that reality wasn't possible even a decade ago. So kudos to you, Sangeeta. Very glad to have you. So
Thank you,
together
Sushma.
between both of them, we have the what and the how. Frank brings the what, the connected experience and the new business models, while Sangeeta brings us how the virtual validation makes it all safe and real. So let's dive in. So are you guys ready for the killer questions? So key
Absolutely.
Yes.
technologies. So key technologies disrupting mobility, right? So Sangeeta, from your point of view, right, you are looking at the product development and the product development life cycle, and even post development when the vehicle is in the field and the issues that come up. How do you see, from building the product standpoint, how these technologies are helping and evolving, and what is the impact, and what kind of technologies are actually necessary?
First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. It's great joining you and Frank here. I'm glad to be a part of this talk. So I'd like to focus on two main technologies here. One is digital twins, which is near and dear to my work that I do here at Stellantis. And of course, artificial intelligence, which has taken over a lot of the development and testing, at least from the validation side. So I'd like to focus on both these things. First, talking a little bit about digital twins. As you all are familiar, digital twins provide the virtual environment. And basically, it's a physical system replica that integrates the real world data with simulation models. What typically does so, or the advantage of digital twins, it allows the engineer to test and develop systems under operating conditions, safe operating conditions that are that could not be tested in actual vehicles, and also develop without building physical prototypes. I think that's one of the key advantages of using virtual prototypes. Then think about the controlled environments where every variable can also be manipulated, in a very safe and very stable environment like the lab environment or cloud environment, as compared to how this will happen in a real world testing where you have to take the vehicle and around in the proving grounds to test ADAS features or to test propulsion controls features. So I think digital twins play a very, very critical goal by moving development and validation into the virtual domain. We as automotive companies, we have control, speed, confidence in our designs. So it's not only about testing faster, it's also about testing smarter. Moving on to apply the AI portion, the artificial intelligence portion. I think this technology is basically think about creating automated tests, using AI, or even making sure that we can ensure intelligent scenario generation in case of an ADAS scenario, analysis, root cause analysis, optimization of the tests that we have to run in the vehicle or in the lab environment. So I really think these two things hand in hand really kind of like help total automotive system validation and development.
That's fantastic. And I understand basically you are talking about the AI technologies which enable also digital twins with cloud capabilities. And just to even, I'm a little tempted to expand this question. So I know, like taking one ECU, like today, the legacy cars have a distributed architecture where you have more than 50 plus, 100 plus modules. So have you been able to see that multi-module ecosystem be able to create and virtualize and be able to fully use it for validation? Have you seen that experience, and what challenges or technologies do you think we still need?
I think you bring up a very important point, right? Because as OEMs, the general challenge that we all face is integrating our systems and validating our systems, vehicle systems, right? And in our legacy OEMs, we always have a lot of suppliers that we provide the software, that provide the hardware. And basically, the difficulty here comes with the diversity of the suppliers, each bringing their own software stack, hardware components, development methodologies. So I don't think this problem statement is only technical, it's also organizational, right? We as XIL team or validation team must coordinate across multiple suppliers, each having their own priorities, while ensuring that we basically get the create a cadence. First of all, create a cadence in which the supplier can deliver to us, but at the same time, we are also getting to a final integrated system, testing it and validating it effectively on time. I think the challenges we face is primarily even for our supplier community to get into this new space of digital twins or the new technology of virtualization, where currently our source packaging requirements already include these virtualization requirements, the agile cadence, the agile methodology of them delivering us the virtual ECU prior to the actual real ECU delivery, But again, there is this interface complexity, right? Every supplier component, they must interact very seamlessly with others. Even small mismatches in like protocols, timing, data formats, all of that can cause a lot of failures, especially during the root causing of the system. Um, I like to focus on validation, quality, and system level testing, right? So when we talk to suppliers, it's more or less component level. Every supplier has their own component that they build individually and deliver to us. The real challenge is validating their component in an entire integrated system under realistic conditions, like how it would happen in a vehicle. And then comes also the responsibility boundaries, like I said in the when I began this section, right? Which is a lot of the challenges is organizational. It's not even technical, right? So responsibility boundaries. When we talk about that, it's not enough to just develop and deliver to us, but it's also when the issues actually arise in the field, when the issues actually arise during testing, it's always unclear whether the fault is basically lying within us as the OEM or them as the supplier who's delivering the software or
The
the
software.
hardware to us, making the
Absolutely.
processing very, very harder.
Absolutely. There is probably a lot of people in the audience who are like looking to see how they have to evolve and how they have to take bits of these advices and implement for their own companies. And I'm going to drop a hint about our upcoming panel focused on validation, where we will be discussing this topic in more detail with you, Sangeeta, and other panelists. So I'm going to leave that, even though I have an itch to go in deep. I'm going to move to Frank. Frank, so, coming with such an extensive background in connected digital platforms, and we have also talked offline about your expertise with Volkswagen and the connected platforms that you have been launching there. So, what do you see? What are the key technological enablers? Which are the key technologies that really are needed for the future and now?
Yeah, thanks again, Shrishma, for having me, and Sangeeta. Great to share the panel with you here. So you mentioned software-defined vehicle. I think that term is used very broadly. We talked about that kind of offline, but I think there's also another type of evolution. I call it more of and it's like an evolutionary convergence of industries. And you talk about enablers. And if you look at connectivity, I think connectivity is also going through, I'll call it a growth spurt. We got just got a little puppy, and I think that thing grows overnight. But connectivity is going to go through a significant growth spurt here, especially as 5G standalone starts to roll out through the mobile network operators. And with that, not just comes more bandwidth and speed, uplink, downlinks, but also newer technologies, real-time kinematics, hyper-precise location, edge compute capabilities. You look at, the significant investment that's being made right now in infrastructure to try to enhance vehicle safety through the Department of Transportation's and getting intersection information, collision avoidance, V2V communication, PC5. That's a heavy lift. It's a very capital intensive lift. It's another long roadmap for the rollout. But if you look at connectivity, you look at the networks, you look at edge compute, these components put together with hyper-precise location and real-time kinematics can change the game almost immediately when it comes to safety. And we've done some tests. We actually launched our CV to network capabilities for disabled vehicle messaging. We can also communicate to other vehicles, to Stellantis vehicles, on whether our vehicle's disabled, sharing that across the ecosystem. Cloud infrastructure is another big game changer. You mentioned digital twin, but there's also a digital twin for the car to synchronize always the latest data and software in the vehicle over time. Over-the-air update capabilities have been around, but they're just going to grow and enhance. And then even further down the road, you're going to start looking at low Earth orbit satellite connectivity. And that's opening up a whole new type of technology front that will make it much, much easier to achieve full level autonomy without continuously putting all that capital hardware into the vehicles and having to price for it. So I really see that convergence of evolutionary technology in the car, evolutionary technology of the ecosystem around the car, partners, sharing that development cost across our partners. You can't price everything in the vehicle anymore. It's just gotten way, way too expensive. So you need ecosystem partners to evolve. And I think the car business has done really a great job over the generations of the networks as they rolled out to find that alignment. So now there's a very key synchronization that's happening. And through that synchronization, we're able to plan and we're able to build those synergies and build those new models that'll help relieve some of the pricing in the car and build the business models around the car.
That's quite interesting, right? Like you named so many of these technology enablers, but that each technology enabler is an industry in itself, right? Like there's a cloud providers, there are AI model providers, there's these mobile network providers. These are multiple companies at every level of this technology, whether you're talking about semiconductors, whether you're talking about the traditional tier one suppliers who have some like chassis or other types of specialty skill sets. And this ecosystem is just so vast, right? And if all of these technologies has to come together to create
Yeah.
truly a connected platform for the vehicles and create those services and create those new business models, then how do you see these partnerships, this supply chain to be evolving? Because I personally see that some of the suppliers are, I think, struggling and some of them are thriving in this change. How do you see it, Frank? Maybe we start with you first.
So, there always has to be a solid foundation, right? So as an OEM, the foundation has to be there in the connectivity platform's capability and agility, right? We mentioned that, even right down to the testing and how do you make that more and more real time. But then you also, I always say if the car can do it, we can do it. So there has to be capabilities built into the vehicle to be able to receive messages, to have access to the screen, the voice channel, the microphone. It takes me back to meetings in Germany in 2017-ish. We're whiteboarding the concept of what do we want our infotainment to do, and the concept of having a sandbox and a head unit made the security guys just cringe. They're like, oh my God, what are you doing here? Once we launch that thing, it's boxed up, it's watertight, and nothing can get into it. And we said, no, we want to have an access channel. We want to be able to access that screen, the voice, and the microphone. And then the question was, well, what are you going to do with it? Hell, if we knew back then, we just knew that it's going to evolve so fast over the next years that we needed a channel to communicate to our customers. So we built that channel, and now here we are, 5-6 years later, and we're actually optimizing, we're leveraging that channel. We're accelerating new products that are safety driven, that are content driven, that open up the door for these new business models, that open up the door for sitting down with multiple carriers. So we have carrier of choice, or we can provision our car for all the major carriers in the US, and the customer can choose which one they want. These are the little seeds that we planted over the years to get to the point now where we have that full flexibility and capability to leverage everything in the car, communicate it to the customers, whether it be through the screens in the vehicle or even through the app ecosystem that's created with it, together with those partners. So this is, like I said, this is just now really beginning to set foot and gain some traction. It's not just safety. Safety is always important, and it's easy to enhance safety now from what I outlined before with CD to network. But now you have the channel of an Android platform in the car, much easier to develop these apps, right? And then you have just the data relationship. Is it going to run through a B2B APN, a B2C, or do we build B2B2C models? How do we get customers to engage in the core product when they buy the car, and how do we enhance that product over time? By adding more features and data and complementing what we started with to even extend that to a wider range of improving safety and content in the vehicle. So for me, it's just the beginning, and there's so much infrastructure that we can leverage now. But the key for the OEM, the foundation has to be right. The car needs to be able to do it. It's got to be robust and reliable in the vehicle. And then you have to have that flexibility and enablement and capability in your back-end systems. And a lot of OEMs are developing that or redeveloping. Some of them are still struggling with trying to consolidate all these systems into one to make it work cohesively. Somewhere you got to draw the line and say, you know what, let's just do the next generation. Like when we did from Gen 1 to Gen 2 CarNet, we started with a time to market partnership. Now it was a tier one supplier relationship, and evolved that into a joint venture business that we started that we'll talk about in a little bit, but also that foundation to be able to sew it all together seamlessly and know we can do it even though we're not really sure what it's going to have to do in the coming years. That's
It's
the
a bit of
magic.
a futuristic.
Yeah.
So essentially, what you pointed out is that different technologies eventually are geared towards creating a value for the customer. So that end customer value will create and drive the co-development amongst the technology providers to create that experience. And those different ecosystem partnerships will come up as you grow. So I know I have seen Volkswagen partner with many companies, right? Many players like Microsoft, Ford, Rivian, Scout Motors. Some of these are OEMs by themselves, right? So over the years, I have also seen like Volkswagen venture into this connected vehicle platform, probably more than a decade ago, with a joint venture with Eris to form Ventec. So this is a
Yep.
different type of relationship formation, right? Why not just have Eris be a supplier instead of being a joint venture? So some of these partnerships that are forming, right? You will see that along many technology providers as well, like NVIDIA, Qualcomm's, you name it. So how do you see different partnerships that are evolving and why they are necessary?
So one of the advantages I would say that we had being in the North American region, we had a high degree of autonomy, I'll say, to really jump in and accelerate and focus on how we want to restructure this business when we launched our Gen 2 CarNet with model year 20. The Ventic JV came around to us learning from the Gen 1 relationship we had, which was really a tier one supplier base. And when you have that kind of a relationship in such a dynamic space, like the one that we're talking about today around connected mobility and connectivity overall, you need to be agile. And you need to form a partnership where you share some of the development costs, where you share some of the code development and the responsibilities, where you both have skin in the game. You are both on the hook to deliver this thing. And we just felt that a tier one relationship was just not the right formula anymore, because you end up in this, give me the requirement, I built you the requirement, it's not my fault it doesn't work the way you wanted it to, well then you guys go ahead and fix it and pay me more. The JV created really that level of collaboration, of problem solving. And I think the biggest challenge we have in the car industry is it's hard to find good problem solvers, and especially in this space that's so dynamic, and you need partnerships across that ecosystem. So with Carrier of Choice and with the JV, we built an ecosystem of Eris Ventic being our IoT device platform that supported the hardware in the vehicle, to Cubic helping us with the SIM provisioning and management, going out to the MNOs, to Verizon, T-Mobile, and also discussions with AT&T. How do we build this end-to-end process where we all share responsibility and accountability and form those partnerships, whether it be a JV or even with the way we manage our carriers? That's a partnership because we're not stuck to one. We have multiple, so we learn from each other. How do we build that system to work, and how do we manage it together? It takes more than just one company to solve a problem in the field. You've got to tap into all of those IT backend systems to really understand how the devices are behaving in the field. And that starts with a tight collaboration with teamwork. And for us, what was important was the device platform is really the core mechanism for the outside connectivity. And with the JV, we have that shared responsibility, shared accountability, and shared development responsibility with Eris, who's really an incredible partner. And lastly, what I want to say is I wanted a partnership that also had eyes to the outside world. What's the newest advancing technology, right? And through the JV and the equal partnership we have there, we're always in a dialogue of what's the next generation, how's the space evolving? The risk you run if you bring it all in-house, you start believing your own propaganda and you start drinking your own Kool-Aid and you think you're rock stars, and all of a sudden the bottom falls out. So you need that element of outside vision and outside lens to keep you competitive and keep you honest on how good you are. And I think you can only really do that through a JV because you can be honest with each other because you share that accountability.
And that's a very interesting point of view. Essentially, you're saying that the co-development is an essential aspect of it. Secondly, the technologies are so vast and diverse, which need PhD is the wrong term, but a lot of detail and depth that no one company can take all those technologies together in-house, which I think is a lot of OEMs are learning this aspect as we
Mhm.
speak. Um, and you mentioned about, Europe, US, and China a bit. So when you see this, how does this complexity multiply? And how does a tech stack, a product, stay competitive in different regions? What is your point of view? And I definitely want to see the same thing with Sangeeta in the product development space because magic is happening both places.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of people that'll disagree with what I say right now, but I honestly believe that you cannot standardize any of this across all the regions. China operates very, very differently and much more agile than in Europe. And Europe has a lot of legal restrictions and constraints with privacy. And the US is kind of a blend between the two. It's evolving more privacy oriented with legal restrictions, but not to the extreme of GDPR in Europe. And we want to become as agile as China. And then all our customers are very different across the region. So do you build one platform and then try to piecemeal it together in those regions? Or do you say, you guys are a region, you've got the scale, let's learn from each other across the regions of what works for you and what's effective in using this ecosystem compared to other parts of the world and maybe create the synergies across the regions that way? But I think a one solution for the globe and a centralized place to do the coding and distribute it, I think that's a lot of money that's going to be used to try to fix problems in the regions later. But in the meantime, the customer is the one that's going to suffer on the delivery of the products and how the product actually works for their market. So I know I probably agitated a few people out there in the ether, but that's just my personal experience. And we in the US and the North America region were incredibly successful in building, I think, which is probably the best performing platform uh, within the group, but also top 5 in the US when you look at some of the JD Power reports.
That's a fantastic view. And truth be told, I was actually researching about this topic, and some of the first-hand experiences also I see is that many companies are trying to play in China, take their product and adopt it locally. And then the next step is to do local innovation for the local market, then build a tech stack, and then take that tech stack globally, right? So I think that evolution is definitely happening amongst the Chinese market players, whether they are coming from outside to China or are local to Chinese market itself. So that's a play I would love to see how it's going to evolve. But Sangeeta, so from a software quality point of view, how do you see these partnerships play? Because this is a place where the traditional, a tiered structure of supply chain is truly being disrupted. And some of our audience who comes from supply chain, tier one, tier twos, how do you see that landscape, that partnership getting evolved with the work that you do?
Yeah, I think if you're talking about our legacy software hardware provider, right? I think right now, I think it is quite evolving. The relationship is quite evolving, right? So traditional suppliers who once, I mean, focused on getting the mechanical, electrical components to us, now as an OEM, we are requesting a lot more from them, okay, to be a part of our even like the digitally orchestrated ecosystem, right? So generally, their value is shifting from purely being a software hardware provider to actually becoming our partners in system integration, validation, lifecycle support, OTA, you name it. Okay. So that whole, again, the relationship is quite changing there. So if you talk about like what are the new roles that these suppliers are actually taking, is collaboration in ecosystems. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. And again, the cadence, the agile cadence of when we want a supplier to deliver to us, kind of like has changed at this point of time. We're not like providing them requirements for them to come back with a software or a hardware, designed and developed hardware at a later point of time, because we want to be more agile. We want to make sure that we are able to get these components from them, integrate it earlier, find issues earlier, and fix these issues as you kind of like design and build. So this is the shift that we are basically going through at this point of time. So in that, we want them to collaborate in our ecosystem, right? They're not isolated contributors. They're part of a tightly integrated ecosystem where we actually want them to be interoperable with us, and these are things that we feel is very essential. Even when we talk about like continuous deliveries, continuous updates of softwares in the field, right? Again, Frank talked about connectivity and the benefits that we have kind of, or the features that we have developed over time. When we bring in the supplier into that ecosystem, we're saying instead of just one-time deliveries, suppliers must support over the air updates, patches, feature enhancement, all of that throughout the product cycle. So it's not like a one-time, investment, but rather a continuous relationship or continuous update, continuous involvement as the product goes through its life cycle.
That's fantastic
Why?
because in the past it was a tiered structure, right? So I have been in OEM and I have been in tier one, where the OEMs usually give you a statement of work, and you kind of build your product towards it. It takes you 2 years. You deliver that product gets integrated, releases in the market. So what you're saying is it's no longer true. The suppliers are going to be involved throughout the entire development cycle and even post sell, and more of on the partnership point of view, right? And more of co-developers than black and white clear lines. So this is a pretty evolving space. I'm sure the legalese between the companies are getting pretty excited about these things. I know I read somewhere that the CEO of Volkswagen, Thomas Schaefer, he mentioned that the suppliers, the OEMs, the ecosystem partners or tech partners, and politicians have to come together to make the world of tomorrow happen, right? Something of the sort. These are not his exact words. And we won't talk about the politicians, but I think that also plays a huge part in how this ecosystem is going to evolve around this future of mobility. And maybe that's another podcast. And we will not talk about it because there is a lot of tariff talk already happening outside this panel discussion as well. So well, we talked a lot about external partnerships, and I think some of you even talked about your internal organizations. So, how do you see your internal organizations getting disrupted? Because the past was built with a combination of internal skills and outside skills. Now, if the outside skills and relationships are changing, then your internal skills and relationships have to also evolve. So, how does that change today? Maybe Sangeeta, we start with you.
It's a great question. I think it's all about mindset and the culture that we have to build, not only internally but also externally, right? One of the big things that I'm noticing is the cross-disciplinary collaboration, between, I mean, I was completely in silos previously, but I would say the focus was more, okay, I do software development, I integrate software, I validate software, and then I calibrate it, I deploy it in a vehicle, right? Or I deliver it to our plant. But then now, as the features are becoming more and more complex, I don't think you can strictly follow that cadence, especially when we want to deploy the software at a very high quality, very fast, high speed. So there is a lot of movement, or I should say, shift towards cross-disciplinary collaboration. Basically, Scrum kind of like setups where you have developers and testers sitting right next to each other, building code, integrating code, and validating code together. Apart from that, it's also the mission-driven work. Engineers typically they want to solve problems that matter, right? Now, we the problems that matter are what the customer is asking for, right? Framing any of the systems as challenges and basically making them, understand how it directly impacts in human lives. I think that is very, very important. I think that needs to be embedded within the culture itself. And then, of course, the training and tech exposure to, cutting edge features, cutting edge tools, hands-on experience with a lot of the AI, or how to use AI in their day-to-day work. All of that will definitely help and help the engineers see how their work is being deployed as tangible products in the vehicles.
Absolutely. I think that means you're basically pointing out that it's no longer the traditional waterfall V model. We are going towards an agile system, as well as the organizations are going towards upskilling because there is not enough software engineers out there. And if you don't have that, then you must integrate with AI agents and see how your workforce will coexist with the AI agents and help kind of develop the future of tomorrow for the products. So, Frank, you have seen not just within one company but multi-company conglomerate of Volkswagen. How do you see this evolve for companies out there, the internal organizations and the internal fight, if I can say that?
Well, I mean, I go back to, I've been in the industry 34 years, and I started my career with Siemens in Munich, part of an in-house management consulting team that worked together with McKinsey and Company. And one of the things that stuck in my head back then that's still very relevant today is everything is a process. And I think Sangeeta said it, it's cross-functional. Companies have tried to restructure into these functional responsibilities, but then you have interfaces where things kind of fall between the cracks. I think there has to be a balance between function, delivering the function, but also the cross-functionality of how the system works. We're building systems now. We're not just building one feature component or a function in the vehicle. That function is part of multiple functions that create the system, which is an end product for our customers. And a lot of companies and organizations, I feel, are struggling with how to balance that equation, right? How to balance an organization to deliver in that systems mindset. Who reports to whom? How does that reporting structure work? Who gives this team the responsibility to develop something, and how do we know it's right? That's really, if a company can work in a matrix organization cross-functionally and think as a system, you're gonna evolve the people that work in that organization and transition them into that mindset and become problem solvers. And that's really where the key is in making the system work. Is it's not saying, well, that's my functional responsibility. We all have a responsibility to deliver a system and a product that works to our customers, for our customers. So we have to solve these problems together. And that, I think, is something that's going to evolve much, much more rapidly now, especially with AI. And some of the things that AI is going to make transparent to us much faster than we ever thought we'd see in our lives is to what the data is telling us and how to solve these problems through the data and how to find the people that know how to solve them. So I think there's going to be huge transformation within the organizations moving forward on how do you harness the system thinking, how do you leverage AI to see how your system's working, what's telling you it isn't working, and how do you find the people in your organization and train them or find people that can fit those new roles to be problem solvers and to think progressively and proactively, because that is what creates the agility in the end.
Absolutely. That is so put right on. One of the other things also I have seen is the software defined vehicle is like a stack, right? It's a service oriented architecture. And based on the architecture, I have seen that the organizations are now restructuring towards that. So if there are application folks, they're in application teams for that domain. But the middleware might be different team completely that provides the middleware for everybody. There is architecture teams which are looking end-to-end architecture. So I think the SDV is not just a technical topic. It's like Sangeeta said earlier, it's an organizational topic. It's an industry topic. And before I conclude on this topic of ecosystem partnerships and supply chain, I want to touch upon your views on open source because I have seen Eclipse, Covesas, car consortiums, and others that have come up on the, uh, you know, um, uh, on the screen. But how do you see that being applied, and what is the future of that when you look at this ecosystem?
Who's that directed towards, me or Sangeeta?
Either of you,
Either of us. So let
Both
me
of you.
just, yeah, let me start with that.
Go ahead,
So,
Frank. Yeah.
so I think open source is just a channel for more creativity, right? What's out there? What can we bring into our vehicles? And I have to go back to the foundational elements that I mentioned earlier. Do we have the right IT system architecture? Is our IT platform capable to leverage through the APIs, through developer platform, anybody that's out there developing content in an open source environment to leverage our interface information through the APIs for us to bring it in, quickly build and deploy. Um, we're there in the US. We can do that in the US. We've proven that out through several different use cases. So the platform capabilities there. Now it's a question of finding the right companies that can develop this content in the open environment out there to say, hey, I've got this great idea. Hey, Volkswagen, what do you think of this? Can you bring it in? Let's quickly do a POC. Let's spin this thing up. You'll see some things come out in the next several months um, where a lot of what I mentioned will make sense, and you'll be like, well, now I know the rest of the stories to the content and how it's coming into the vehicle. So I'm a huge fan of open source, and I think if we do it right, we have the right security measures in place, you have the right token management and cert management in place so that you can leverage things like real-time kinematics and hyper-precise location and pull in that ecosystem of tolling and precise parking locations. And there, it's just it's an endless source of creativity that we can leverage and build products for the customers.
absolutely. Sangeeta?
Yeah. So, Frank, I think I completely agree with you from the perspective of creativity, right? But I do have a few concerns regarding around this, right? So, obviously, the first thing is I come from validation space, and I want to talk about it from the validation space. And root causing triaging is such an important concept. It's basically doing things right. And when I think about open source, one is again going back to who takes the responsibility, right? When an issue occurs in the field. It's open source, a lot of creativity, very good, but then who takes the responsibility, right? The second thing is also it's a challenge. Maybe it could be solved, which is the business model around this open source. There are so many companies that are going to be like contributing to this piece, right? How do we come up with a good business model that can provide the right, you know, right remuneration or right pay to the right companies, right? So who takes ownership? Again, it's a question of who takes ownership in this case.
Frank, you want to address that?
Yeah, I think you get into the different types of business models, and I mentioned earlier, you just can't price everything into the vehicles anymore. But I tell you, there's within this ecosystem, and I'm a technologist. I'd love to leverage technology because that creates business and new business models, right? 5G standalone, game changer, hyper precise location. Play that out. Think about tolling. Think about California, where one segment can cost you $6 for driving 2 miles, and the next one will be $3, right? It opens up hyper precise location of knowing where that vehicle is in that lane within 3 to 10 centimeters of accuracy. It changes how a toll booth is going to be structured. Think of all that capital that was put in there to be able to sense cars. Do you need all of it? Now that we can tell you exactly in a hyper precise location with a timestamp where that vehicle was, and then you automate the whole billing and you can push a message and say this stretch of the 101 in California cost you 15 bucks. And then you get an email with a bill. I mean, it's a game changer, right? So I'm a big fan of leveraging that type of technology for the future. And I think those new business models will come out of it, whether it be B2B relationships. We'll be saving the ecosystem a bunch of capital invest. So share some of that savings so that we all participate equally in this ecosystem to advance vehicle safety and the accuracy of these cars and new business models. Content, how do we bring content in, right? You got the screen, you got in-vehicle Wi-Fi, you can bring in your own stuff. I mean, that within itself is a closed environment. So there's marketing opportunities. I see a huge transformation in our business models in the near future, in the partnerships that are going to come up to help pay for us to develop it in the cars, but also to share some of that revenue that's created through other channels that we don't even understand today. And that's going to happen much faster now.
You both have done such a fantastic job. You have put me into my last topic of conversation, which is the new business models and monetization. So let's follow the money trail, right? And I agree with you, with Sangeeta. Like in the open source, there's a lot of companies, especially like the German VDA partners, right? You look at them, traditionally, they have always contributed to creating standards, whether they are like AUTOSAR like standards or others. They have definitely helped. Now they are also pioneering some of the technologies with Eclipse Foundation. So I saw a note about SCore, right? It's SDV related software components, and it is being developed in open source and released. So this is safety critical as well. And this open source software is available for others to try out. When I was at GM, my team was building end-to-end applications, and we were building on this Ultify architecture, which eventually became like U protocol, U services, some of it, and got contributed to Eclipse Foundation. But there was no monetization as such, right? It's available for others to leverage it. So when you see that there is this data, there is subscription possibilities, there is a lot of data that is coming out, there is partnerships. How do you see this new business model really come up? So Frank, you have talked about it. So could you give us like a preview or an example of what is something that doesn't exist today, could exist in the future as a business model or a monetization possibility?
So think about driver assist systems, ADAS. I mentioned some of the CV to network stuff that we're doing around safety messaging, whether it be, the partnership with ESS on disabled vehicle messaging, emergency messaging, construction zones, school zones. It's infinite, right? You can bring bicyclists in it. You can bring pedestrians into this. Those are just ways to try to enhance safety, which is something that consumers, there is a willingness to pay for that. But there's other ecosystem partners that will leverage the data that we need from the vehicle, that will leverage that hyper precise location to be able to find ways to generate B2B business models. There's ways we can take an existing feature in the car, like I mentioned, driver assist systems. Now, what do you layer on top of that, right? So we can bring in road experience data. The vehicle can capture lane markings. It goes to a third party, streams it back in the car. Now you could literally drive down a dirt road and the car will think there's lanes and it will maintain the center of it. That's all part of ADAS. So maybe we build kits on top of that, where through the mobile app, you can enhance your ADAS systems by buying your REM data, by improving the next level of system updates that we want to put into the car to be able to upgrade its capability. These are things where consumers are willing to pay for some of that stuff on a pay-as-you-go model. Maybe you bundle it in as something when you buy the vehicle, as an option package of some sort. So there's the core car, the car you're going to buy. It's going to have some of these features and capabilities in it. And then as the vehicle evolves over time, update the sensory, update the capability of what that sensory can do, enhance the safety, and you can start adding packages on top of that and selling new features. Media content, going into two-way satellite connectivity, continuous ubiquitous coverage. That's ultimately where autonomous driving is going to go. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, there that won't be initially priced in the car, but I think customers will have the ability to update their vehicle and pick and choose what they want to do with it.
Frank, I agree with you to a certain extent, but we have also seen customers really push back with like heated seats or remote start. So
Yeah,
how do
but
you
heated seats
define?
are good. I mean, you buy a car with heated seats, you're going to get your heated seats. But if we're applying software to enhance a feature that you bought that just got better 2 years later, that's something that I think consumers are willing to pay for.
So essentially, like a version 1 is in the base, and then the version 2, version 3 could be priced as additional features.
Could be priced in, could be leveraged with a partnership that we have. Who knows? I mean, there's going to be B2B models where third-party companies are going to come in and say, hey, if you do this, there's an opportunity for us to have a win. I call it win-win-win, right? We as the OEM win, the third-party provider wins, and the customer wins. That's really the equation you want to have, because maybe the customer doesn't have to pay for it and they get the benefit, but there's other ways to generate revenue around the vehicle. Let's tap into those ecosystems.
So essentially, you're saying that the monetization works if it's transparent, it's fair, and secure from the customer point of view.
Yep.
Because if they feel like I'm already paying for it, then it doesn't go anywhere, essentially. So when you look at the software-defined stack, right, and you look at the technologies that are coming together as an integrated product, whether from the mobile to the sensor end and back, right? All of these technologies, do you see that these technologies are similar for other industries like aerospace or defense? I see some companies who are trying to do that in other industry spaces. And the reason to ask is that, recently I read one article from Roland Berger. It's a consulting firm. They
Yeah.
stated that the companies that enter into partnerships and tap into new markets will emerge stronger in the transformation. So if they are partnering and they are going to new markets, what are the new markets, right, within the automotive or beyond? So do you see that the same partnerships, tech giants or ecosystem partners could tap into automotive and beyond?
Yeah, I think take satellite, right? Low Earth orbit satellites. Yeah, we can do messaging, sending out an SMS packet for location. You could use MEO and GEO satellites today, that's fine. But if you look at all the mobile network operators, they're all partnering with their LEO satellite providers, whether it be T-Mobile and Starlink, and Verizon has theirs, AT&T has theirs. Look at the airline industry. Look what Starlink is doing with United Airlines and probably with the others. Using LEOs is now opened up a whole different type of infotainment. The entertainment in a plane is going to change dramatically. And you're going to be able to now open up voice channels and do your video chats. And, quietly, please. I don't want to hear your conversation sitting next to you. But look at what's going to happen in that airline, in the airplanes. And that's going to be our first indicator of what's going to happen in the vehicle down the road. Once you have that 5G standalone plus satellite and other ways to stream content into the vehicle, that will show us where to go to find some of that revenue to help pay for the investment.
That's very interesting how you see it. How about you, Sangeeta?
Definitely the same thought process here, right? Technology built, I don't think we should really think about it. Okay, this is automotive, this is transportation, this is aerospace. I think technology built can be reused across multiple industries. And I think this is our future.
That's really very concisely and very well put. That means we can look to consumer industries to bring some technologies to us, and I think we are doing that already. So with that, right, before we get into closing statements, I want to ask both of you an art of possible, right? We're talking about the convergence of technology and what the technology could give us. So maybe Frank, from your point of view, in one line, if you had to say, what is the art of possible with what's happening today?
So I think it's like I mentioned earlier that connectivity is really going through another growth spurt. And it's not just the integration inside the vehicle and the advancements of the networks, but it's an evolutionary convergence of ecosystems. And I emphasize the word evolutionary because every time something went revolutionary, it ended up taking a lot longer and cost a shitload more money. So for me, engineering is an evolutionary process. As long as we keep learning and we have those iterations, you can then control the growth and the learning curve and build on that. So I really see it as an evolutionary convergence of ecosystems and the integration inside the vehicle.
Perfect. How about you, Sangeeta?
So I think just supporting whatever Frank said, right? It is basically coming together of automotive and tech. That's what is happening right now. That's the evolution, right? So, I mean, basically using the technology to provide our customers with safe mobility, right? And quality software. I think that's the most important aspect of this whole convergence that's happening right now.
It sounds perfect. And thank you both of you for such a truly insightful conversation. I truly enjoyed it. I'm sure our listeners will be as well. Just to kind of, conclude on our key takeaways for our listeners. So some of the themes, I'm sure you spread a lot more key nuggets of knowledge along the way. But three things I would like to kind of summarize. It's not just about software-defined vehicles anymore. It's AI-powered software-defined vehicles. I recently heard the term AIDV, and when you guys had mentioned AI so much, I think it's truly the AIDV, right? Whether it's partnerships or the supply chain or your OEM companies. And partnerships are now the new horsepower. No one builds this future alone. And I think that was very clear from all of your conversation. The second is the supply chain is becoming a collaboration change. It's a co-development that's going to be a new normal. And I think that is going to create an external change in the industry as well as internal to the companies, how the companies get structured. So that was very well, I think, discussed and conveyed by both of you. The last but not the least is the car is no longer a finished product. It's a more like an MVP that gets released, and then it's a living and evolving service that keeps developing with this co-development model in the industry. And with that, we are going to see a new shared revenue and new cost structures, as Frank pointed out. So with that, I guess we are reinventing the vehicles, the way they are building, the way they will be owned, and the way we will make money with the vehicle industry. So thank you so much for both of you for joining today. And I want to just drop a key point that we will be having another panel discussion with Sangeeta to deep dive on the validation side of things. And there is another deep dive on monetization and digital cockpit experience panel. So if you like this conversation, please look for those two other ones. Thank you so much and enjoy.